Iran's most precious treasure, coveted by the rest of the world, is the Strait of Hormuz, through which a large portion of the oil that keeps the world economy moving passes. But on February 28, 2026, a surprise bombing shook the Islamic Republic of Iran. A military operation by the United States of America and the State of Israel, which led Iran to respond by closing the Strait of Hormuz, and one of the most dangerous global crises we have experienced in recent history. Join us to learn the true story of the Strait of Hormuz and this war with theological, metaphysical, geopolitical, and even tribal features. Let's start with the basics. What is the Strait of Hormuz? As its name suggests, it is a strait or a narrow body of water that connects the Persian Gulf to the west and the Gulf of Oman to the east. It is the only maritime passage that connects both bodies of water and the only one that provides a sea outlet to the Persian Gulf, covering an area of between 8,000 and 10,000 square kilometers. Currently, the countries that control the strait are Iran to the north and Oman to the south of the Strait of Hormuz. In this way, it would be a privileged geographical point, with its narrowest point not exceeding 40 kilometers and its depth of 80 meters, making it ideal for navigation. Since ancient times, the Strait of Hormuz has been under the influence of the Persian civilization. One of the first great states to take advantage of this region was the Kingdom of Hormuz in the 10th century AD, which, rather than a territorial empire, was an empire of Hormuz, a maritime empire that benefited from trade between China and India with the Middle East. According to the historian Percy Sykes, the Persians had an old proverb that said, and I quote, "If the world were a ring, Hormuz would be the jewel of that ring," a phrase that reflects the commercial and cultural value that this strait had for that entire culture and region. Around the year 1507, the Portuguese took control of Hormuz.
Estrecho de Hormuz cuando conquistan el Reino de Hormuz.
They took control of several of the islands in it, which we will talk about later. The Portuguese were the first to use the strait to profit from fruits, in a massive way charging all kinds of taxes for navigation through it. It wasn't until 1620 that the Shah of Iran, that is, the king of the Persian Empire, named Abbas the First, tried to regain control of the strait. To do this, he allied with the English from Great Britain in order to expel the Kingdom of Portugal from those lands, something that was accomplished in 1622. From this point on, the United Kingdom would maintain strategic control of the Strait of Hormuz through alliances with the Shahs of Persia. Thus, a complex relationship spanning centuries was established between the British island and the Iranian kingdom. The British profited from the payment of tributes by French, Dutch, and Spanish merchants, as well as from the Kingdom of Iran. Similarly, trade began to be regulated at the port of Bandar Abbas, which is located on the mainland in Iran and still exists today.
Al Reino Unido le interesaba, entre otras cosas, mantener el dominio del estrecho.
Hormuz to control the chain of trade with India, as well as with its Asian colonies, which were not few. This dominance would last until 1971, the year when the British withdrew from the strait and left control of the region in the hands of Iran. It should be noted that Iran is the name that Iranians have always used for their nation, while the West has called it Persia for millennia. But since 1935, the first Shah of the Pahlavi dynasty officially requested that his country be called Iran. The truth is that both before and after the British handover, the Strait of Hormuz was already a key piece in the global oil trade. By 1972, it is estimated that Western Europe and Japan depended on about 70% of the oil that passed through that strait. For its part, in 1973 with the war, the Yom Kippur War, which triggered a global energy crisis. In the 1970s, it became clear that if the strait were closed, a large part of the world would suffer severe economic and energy shocks. Even so, the strait did not experience major problems until 1979. That year, the Islamic Revolution succeeded, establishing a new regime governed by Sunni Ayatollahs, especially with the rise of the Ayatollah and new supreme leader of Iran, Ruhollah Khomeini. With this new regime, the relations of the now Islamic Republic of Iran with the rest of the world would begin. With the United States and with Israel, take a 180-degree turn. The alliance between these countries is broken, and they become hostile enemies in the region. Iran saw Israel as an invader in that region and a threat to its sovereignty as the Iranian Republic. And Israel saw Iran as a threat to its existence as a state. And don't miss the videos we have on the channel about these topics.
Regresando al año 1979.
From that year on, Iran would know how to use, just like its predecessors, the influence of the Strait of Hormuz on the world economy as a political and geopolitical weapon. For its part, the United States begins to consider any attack or obstruction of the strait as, quote, a threat to national security, in what became known as the Carter Doctrine, which is upheld in the United States to justify and authorize the military presence of the North American power in countries like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, which have fundamentally been its main allies in that region. The first contemporary military conflict that took place in that channel occurred between 1980 and 1988 in what is known as the Tanker War, a war that took place in the context of the war between Iraq and Iran, where both sides attacked oil tankers and other vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, as well as in its surroundings, using naval mines and fast boats with missiles to disrupt ship traffic at certain points. Although Iran did not completely close the Strait of Hormuz, the situation forced the United States to escort Kuwaiti oil tankers and to intervene in the war by attacking the Iranian Navy to protect the country. Consequences of this conflict will include relative inflation in Europe and Japan, as well as a slowdown in global trade, and hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses for the shipping companies whose oil tankers were attacked. After the 1980s, it wasn't until 2012 that Iran once again threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz because of the sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe in response to Iran's controversial nuclear program and its alleged intentions to launch a nuclear attack against the United States, a topic that gives us a lot to talk about in a future documentary. The mere announcement by Ayatollah Ali Khamenei that he was going to close the Strait of Hormuz causes panic in the oil and global markets. The price of a barrel goes from $100 in December 2011 to $126 in March 2012. It remained high until the end of that year, affecting the prices of many products and services for the global population, until the tensions finally dissipated. Once again, the strait was not closed, but the possible reactions to a future closure became evident. Threats like these, in which the Republic of Iran says it will close the strait and the United States responds firmly, would continue to repeat in 2012, 2018, 2019, 2022, and 2024. But beyond the threats and speeches, there are no significant results in concrete actions on this matter, except for the increase in insurance premiums for oil tankers in that region and around the world. Even during the so-called 12-day war, which took place in June 2025, between Israel and Iran, the Strait of Hormuz was not closed. The maritime flow was not reduced and prices did not increase. Well, this situation is going to change radically towards the end of February 2026 when the European Union and Israel launch a surprise and direct attack on various key points of the Republic of Iran, starting a new war that is currently ongoing. As we know, on February 28, 2026, the United States, in alliance with Israel, carries out the so-called Operation Epic Fury, in which they conduct coordinated airstrikes against military installations and innocent civilian targets in Iran, resulting in the death of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and much of the nation's top military and intelligence command. Days later, on March 2nd, Iran announces for the first time the complete closure of the Strait of Hormuz, claiming they will attack any ship that passes without authorization. Instantly, oil traffic drops by 70%. More than 150 ships are forced to anchor outside the strait, and the price of a barrel of oil skyrockets from $72 to $126 in the following days. Hours later, Iran announces that only ships from countries that expel their American and Israeli ambassadors, or that leave these countries out of negotiations with Iran, will be allowed to pass through the strait. Sporadic transit is also allowed for countries like Italy, Pakistan, and more importantly, China. In the days following March 2nd, the United States has carried out drone attacks on more than 28 Iranian oil and military vessels. At the same time, together with Israel, they have bombed several locations in the country to pressure for the reopening of the strait. But despite the continuous American bombings, the Republic of Iran has remained firm in closing the strait. So it is worth asking, among other things, how can Iran maintain such an effective closure of the channel? And the answer is both geographical and military. The Strait of Hormuz is divided almost 50% between Iran and Oman, a nation that remains neutral in this conflict. And although at first glance the strait seems wide enough for the oil tankers from the Persian Gulf countries to pass only through Oman, in reality the strait is divided into two channels, one for entry and one for exit, each only 3.2 kilometers wide. The entry channel passes through the Iranian side and the exit channel through Oman, but given the proximity between both channels and the large size of the tankers, even so, by passing only through the Omani side, the ships are still exposed to attacks from Iran. This leaves the countries of the Persian Gulf, such as the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, who are nothing less than the world's largest oil exporters and allies of the United States, without the possibility of shipping their barrels of oil by sea, giving rise to the energy crisis we've talked about. Another key factor is that Iran controls the entire northern coastline of the strait, a coast surrounded by bays, cliffs, and mountains. And it also controls the vast majority of islands that lie in the strait, islands that function as natural, immovable aircraft carriers from where they can monitor or attack any ship passing through the region. So, because of how narrow the strait is, Omani sovereignty is practically nullified by Iran's geographical military advantages. On the other hand, Iranian military technology, although not as sophisticated as the American one, is powerful enough to cause severe damage to oil tankers and other military targets. As part of its military arsenal, there are dozens of Mihan 3 naval mines that have been planted along the strait. Fast boats loaded with rocket launchers and light torpedoes from the Revolutionary Guard, which, together with reconnaissance drones, patrol the entire strait. Anti-ship cruise missile, anti-ship missiles, with a range of 300 kilometers stationed along the mountains of the Iranian coast of the strait, easily movable from one point to another. And finally, Shahed 136 attack drones capable of flying up to 2,000 kilometers and which can be launched from anywhere in Iranian territory and accurately hit ships or other targets thanks to their global positioning system precision. In this way, Iran, although severely affected in terms of the supply of basic products and overall economic income, since its oil exports have been reduced by 60%, still manages to maintain tight control over the Strait of Hormuz. But this situation is going to change with an unprecedented escalation of ultimatums issued by President Donald Trump. From Easter Sunday, April 5th, to the threat of exterminating an entire civilization on April 7th. If they didn't finish opening the Strait of Hormuz, but we'll come back to this later. The truth is that by early April, when the Strait of Hormuz was still closed, crude oil exports had come to a halt at about 21 million barrels per day. Liquefied natural gas from countries in the Persian Gulf, sending oil prices to 4-year highs, and liquefied natural gas up to $30 per million British thermal unit. That is, the amount of energy released by the gas when it is burned. For their part, countries like China, which gets 45% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz, as well as India, Japan, and Europe, began to face shortages of these resources during those days. And the United States, even though it leads global oil production this year, ended up releasing 172 million barrels from its reserves, which is 40% of its reserves, covering only 26 days of normal flow, with an estimated recovery time of between 3 and 5 months. While the strait remained closed during these first days of April, the prices of gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel rose dramatically, causing stock markets to plummet and raising alarms about a global recession. Food items like rice, oil, legumes, among others, increased by an average of 40%, made worse by disruptions in fertilizers and shipping costs, which by early April had already risen by 90%. And emerging economies like Argentina and Latin America are suffering from inflation in transportation and food. The blockade also affects India, Thailand, and Brazil. Because of the inability to trade soy or corn for livestock feed, and ultimately for meat production for the population, it also threatens crops in the Northern Hemisphere and causes food inflation. As we can see, within weeks of the strait being closed, not only the global oil business was at stake, but also the economic and energy stability of a large part of the world. Now, in the last few hours, key events have occurred that seem to change the dynamics of the ongoing war and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. After having promised that an entire civilization would die because of the social network truth, and after reiterating that there would be fatal consequences for Iran if it didn't open the strait. On April 7 at 8 a.m. West Coast time in the United States, President Donald Trump made a public announcement in which, with Pakistan's mediation, Iran agreed to fully open the Strait of Hormuz, canceling the final attack planned for that day. In addition, according to the announcement, a truce was achieved, or more specifically, a bilateral ceasefire for 2 weeks. And furthermore, both the United States and Iran had agreed on about 10 points to be negotiated regarding the disputed situation. This will later be confirmed by Sared Arachi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, who also stated that the channel will be reopened on the condition that all American and Israeli bombings completely cease. However, currently, according to the British Broadcasting Corporation, there is still minor military activity between Israel and Iran, even though Israel, according to the same source, had accepted the ceasefire. In the context of this apparent de-escalation of the war conflict, the White House reportedly agreed with Iran, as we mentioned, on a series of 10 points to be negotiated. Among the most important are the full payment of American compensation to the Republic of Iran for reconstruction costs, the total commitment to lift American sanctions against Iran, the complete and permanent cessation of the war against Iran, and the establishment of a protocol and conditions to guarantee the freedom and security of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz after its reopening. Points that, according to some experts, could be beneficial in the long term for an Iranian republic that was severely affected politically, militarily, economically, and socially, where, nevertheless, the Islamic regime, despite its significant losses in the high command, has remained unified and cohesive, governing Iranian territory, maintaining control of the state, and forcefully suppressing protests or any dissent against it. The immediate reactions to the announcement of the opening of the Strait of Hormuz are that the oil market sees a drop in oil prices to $94.5 per barrel. In Iran, there is an apparent sense of relief among the population, who were expecting brutal bombings on energy facilities and civilian targets. And while, on the one hand, at the official level, the Iranian state celebrates a humiliating withdrawal by Donald Trump, in the United States, Donald Trump refers to these events as a victory, and furthermore, as a win for his much criticized policy of world peace through strength. Only in the coming hours, weeks, and months will it become clear whether these negotiations between the United States and Iran will actually lead to anything. Not only for the long-awaited reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which was already open before the war began, but also whether a true agreement will be reached that guarantees stability and peace throughout the entire Middle East region. This was the foreign policy promised by Donald Trump, and if achieved, it would not only reverse the energy crisis generated so far, but could also bring benefits to the global economy. That is, beyond the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, what will determine whether these negotiations can go down in history and succeed? The main goal is whether they can put an end to 47 years of tensions between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States, as well as with countries in the region, such as Israel.
O si por el contrario, se harán.
The differences between the leading Western world power and the local Persian power are deep. Thank you very much to everyone for watching this video. I remind you that your support means a lot to us. By leaving your comments, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, sharing the video with all your friends, and clicking the bell to activate notifications. This was Reynaldo Jose Carrillo Vilches speaking. This is the new encyclopedia. As always, we thank you for all your support and many blessings to everyone.